I know a lot of people get into sex work because it's actually preferable to them to the like service work they were doing before. I agree there are problems with pornography and with sex work, but I really don't like lambasting it as some kind of specific patriarchal evil. Not only because of the adjacency to conservative talking points, but also because it's like I just don't think it is. I think a lot of stuff negatively affects women, and a lot of it sort of is channeled through pornography. The problem is, though, is that, like, pornography is also in many cases liberatory. Like, I know for an absolute fact that there's a very significant portion of pornography production and consumption that fits cleanly into, like, queer and kink identities that help people, you know, understand themselves or whatever. And that's still porn. And if we talk about saying, well, that's fine, but the other isn't, then we're not talking about banning sex work or boycotting sex work or whatever. We're talking about what should sex work look like. And I have plenty of interesting opinions on that in terms of like what laws could be produced or like what specific things could be regulated or touched on or taxed or whatever. I think there's a lot to work on in that sense, you know. But I don't think it's because of the innate badness of the industry. I just think that because sexuality is such a touchy, you know, topic in our mind, people are very vulnerable to the impressions they get from it, and so it should be treated with some degree of care.
I think that there's something profoundly capitalistic about promoting porn as any kind of liberatory means for LGBTQ people. I recognize that it can feel liberatory as opposed to what the struggle looks like currently, because the struggle for LGBTQ liberation historically has not always been one that was super vitalized. And if people turn to porn to seek liberation, that would be understandable, but we need to understand that it's not actually liberation.
Isn't it just like reading a book? It's just media. How is it more capitalistic to look at porn
Because
as a focal point for like body acceptance or queer positivity than a book?
because the people that engage in porn do so for the monetary incentive.
But well, first of all, they can do it for the monetary incentive and also because they believe in what they're producing. That would also describe me, and it also describes pretty much all authors as well. So myself,
Yes, but porn
well,
stars specifically engage in porn and sex work
okay.
because they have the monetary incentive.
That's also the case with people who write books and live stream.
Yeah, but the work that they're doing, not only does the work that they're doing exist under a patriarchal system,
All work
and
does.
yes, but okay, I'll reiterate what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry. Sex work is harmful because the people who engage in sex work are doing so so that they can make money, not because they necessarily consent to it, not necessarily because they would otherwise be sleeping with the person that they're sleeping with, or having sex with the person that they're having sex with, or doing whatever with the person that they're doing whatever with. It's for money, which is why it's bad. It erodes consent.
That
It
is also how media,
produces,
this is just a job. This is how all media is produced.
but sexual consent is uniquely more important and uh, uniquely should be emphasized over the violation of consent of like
See,
a
this
Walmart
is what I
employee.
mean. You didn't mention that before, but this is like a specific weirdness about sex. If there are people who want to produce porn and make a buck off doing it, they both get together and they make the porn, or they have a production studio and they make the porn, they produce it, they make some money off of it. I don't think that's any fundamentally different. Like a writer can spend hours a day writing, have their marriage torn apart, all the time they put into that book, and it releases. You know, there's always a sacrifice.
I could make a bunch of arguments about how the porn industry works and how that's just fundamentally not how porn stars are recruited and
Well,
fundamentally
wait,
not
depends on
how
the
the
porn
industry
star.
functions. But
No, I agree the
well,
porn
okay,
industry is generally very bad and exploitative, but we're talking about the fundamentals here. If there, you said it was capitalistic for queer people to see some degree of liberation in like queer or kink produced pornography, say that pornography is produced by people who legitimately enjoyed producing it, like the message they're putting out there, and also don't mind making money off of it. Is that wrong or capitalistic? Because that's the case with like a lot of art and media, you know? I wouldn't
if
do
those
this
people
if it wasn't for the money that I made because I wouldn't be able to because I'd have to be working a job to make the money to afford my rent. The making money off of a thing is something all people have to do with the work they do unless they're already so wealthy they don't have to worry about it.
if those people would be doing the actions that they're doing outside of the money-based, market-based system that coerced them into the action of the work that they're doing, then yes, it would be acceptable. And yes, that is acceptable, but there's no way to distinguish when a porn star is it would do it otherwise outside of a money-based system.
But money
That's
is a
kind of what I'm trying to.
consideration for all of these jobs.
It is, but the sex work industry wouldn't exist the way that the food industry would outside of capitalism because it's built upon coercion.
We don't. You can't speculate what it would look like outside of that. All labor is built upon coercion and a monetary system. I agree to this. I just don't see what distinguishes sex work.
What does think? Well, when you look at something like the food industry, food needs to be produced and distributed to people in the most effective way possible. But the sex industry, not only is it unnecessary labor, people aren't going to die without it. It's
Well,
also labor that relies on the exploitation of people. And
it does.
further,
Both cases, it does. Food
what?
workers are exploited.
Well, yes, of course. But
So see, this is what I mean. Like, what? So what's the difference?
the difference is that the food workers are being coerced into doing the work that they're doing, and they get exploited doing the work that they're doing, but their work is necessary.
No, I don't care what
Okay.
is or isn't necessary, okay? If we boil that down, then we could say like, oh, well, the only thing you need is grain and like sugar and milk, and that's it, and all other forms of food production are unnecessary. I don't care whether it's necessary or not. It's just not relevant to me. If two people want to make money because they've got like a big dick and a fat pussy or whatever, and they want to make porn, and they make the porn, and they make the money, but they liked making the money and doing the porn, or maybe hell, to them the porn was just like a job. Like a job, sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's kind of tedious, but altogether, you know, it's a living. If they have that attitude towards their sex work, is that not fine?
If they have the attitude of wanting to do it in the first place, regardless of if they were getting paid or
No,
not,
the
that's fine.
specific description that I just gave. They need to make money with their work because we need to pay rent, all of us. So they wanted to make the money. They have to make money somehow, and they thought, hey, I've got a big dick. Why not do it this way? So then they make the porn.
Well, that's not the case for most people who are in the porn industry.
But in that
Most people.
case, do you think that's fine? Do you think that's like an acceptable, equally acceptable thing?
Well, there's no way of eradicating the coercive factors of a money-based system
So under that system where everything is
without
coercive,
abolishing sex work. Or okay, so sorry, I'm going to reiterate. The sex workers are doing it for money, and the work that they engage in is for money. If they just wanted to have sex, they would just have sex, and they would upload it online if they wanted to upload it
yeah,
online.
people do jobs for money.
But people do jobs for money, and that's kind of the issue, because if they're coerced into doing the sex work, it suddenly becomes a much bigger issue than wanting to do it in the first place, regardless of if you were
Same
getting
with
paid or not.
every other job. Also, I don't like the
Yes.
idea. Okay, I don't like the conflation of consent here, terminology-wise, okay? I don't like the idea that, like, a person having to work at Kroger's, even though they don't want to, is the same as a woman being held down and raped. I agree that there is an underlying and fundamental violation of consent associated with having to work for a living because you have to do things to survive. I think that could be mitigated even with like a really robust welfare system or UBI or whatever. But I don't like the conflation here necessarily, okay? So there are two kinds of violations of consent that can happen when porn stars are making porn. One of them is the underlying economic violation of consent associated with needing to make money and therefore having to do that work. But you know what? I've had sex before and I've worked a retail job. If I woke up one day broke, realized I had to make rent, and had to choose between those two venues for making money, and both of them were viable, I would probably choose the sex. That doesn't necessarily mean that I wouldn't do it if it weren't for the money, though. Like, maybe I would rather play, I don't know, video games. But I go like, oh, I was going to play video games all day, but gotta pay rent. Time to go fuck some lady, you know? Would that be a kind of violation of my consent? In a way, yeah, because my decisions are being imposed upon. They're being affected by an economic requirement. But I don't think that's the same as a consent violation, as if one were to do sex work and then was raped. So
I never made that
no, I
conflation
know,
though.
but there is because we keep saying consent, 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 consent. Like there is a implicit blurring here. So I just want to be clear. Rape happens a lot in sex work, and I'm not defending that, obviously. Forms of physical violation happen in a lot of jobs. Obviously, porn stars are very subject to it, because of the job that they do.
Mhm.
But in a situation where that's not happening, and it's just a person who woke up that morning and they had to make some money and they chose to do sex work for it, and it was just like working a job, not necessarily fun, but fine. Do you think that is worse than doing that same thing, getting up to work at like a Safeway or like a grocery store or whatever?
Yes. And I think that's because the violation of sexual consent is uniquely worse than the violation of other types
But
of
in this
consent, like
case,
the
there is
consent
no
to.
violation of sexual consent. That's what I was talking about.
So if you wanted to do it and you went and you did it and then you happen to make money off of it, but you were going to do it anyway.
No, like a regular job, I wouldn't have done it anyway, but it was fine in doing it.
Yeah, I still see an issue with it.
But how is that different from the grocery store?
Because okay, because it contributes to a system of the subjugation of women
No, no, no. We're just
and the
talking about
subjugation of.
we're just talking about two people filming porn together because they want to make some money, and that's a way that they can make that money.
Then two people outside of the industry, outside of the broader industry of porn, get together, film, and then capitalize upon it. And otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. But they do it because they enjoy doing it. I still see an issue with the coercive factor, but I think I will concede that it is the same issue is there with working at Kroger.
Okay,
It's
well,
the same kind of issue.
that's what I
But
believe. Yeah, that
with
there's nothing fundamental about sex work that is more coercive than all other forms of economic coercion.
Well, I think that there are patriarchal social undertones to why somebody would pursue sex work and why somebody would how somebody gets coerced into sex work that make it different.
Well, a significant portion of the people who do sex work are young women who do it to pay like college bills or whatever. And a lot of them like doing it because it pays a lot of money, sometimes, not for everyone, but for some people, a lot of money with relatively low effort. And also, having sex is fun. Um, at least often it can be. Um, like I don't I don't know how much I like the idea of accusing all of them or like feeding into the patriarchy, especially when I know there are, homos who make their porn and they make it all gay like, which isn't as patriarchal, you know? They gay it up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I I legitimately do believe that like the industry of porn is greatly influenced and a product of patriarchy, and it is an adaptation of patriarchy in a capitalist system.
All right, but you
And
know in a socialist society that there would be as much, if not more porn, right? It just people would just be doing it to do it.
if you eradicated the market incentive for the production of pornography, I first of all I doubt there'd be more porn, and secondly, whatever porn was made, I would defend and stand by, because there would be no coercive factors of producing the porn. The porn in itself is not bad because it's the depiction of two people having sex. No, it's because the action of having sex was coerced out of them, and also that coercion is contextualized by the patriarchal system in which we live, and it is reinforced and created by the patriarchal system in which we live. Does that make
What
sense?
if there's a patriarchy under socialism, but they're not being financially motivated?
Then sex work becomes a different conversation. It wouldn't be just the monetary coercion of people. It would be something else. It would be like they are coerced into it by social
Well,
factors.
it could
Like,
just be they like producing it, but it contributes to a broader culture climate of problematic behavior. Like maybe people are willingly engaging in the production of porn, but it's still pretty popular for there to be like interracial porn where there's a giant black dude fucking a tiny white girl and she's like yelling the N-word or whatever. And that's like consensually produced in the sense that nobody needed to be paid for it because it's socialism, but it's still mirroring people's sexual desires, and a lot of people have racist kinks.